Now, in its 17th month, Sudan's civil war is spreading its misery ever deeper and wider. This month, a global food monitoring panel declared a famine at a giant camp in Darfur, home to 500,000 internally displaced people, and said such conditions were plausible elsewhere in the region. It's the world's worst mass displacement crisis. 13 million people forced from their homes, more than 2 million of them fleeing the country. UN officials warn of tens of thousands of preventable deaths in the coming months.
These dire conditions will persist and worsen if the conflict and restrictions on humanitarian access continue. We are at a breaking point.
2 weeks ago, Sudan's military leader survived a drone strike. Since then, Abdel-Fattah al-Burhan has reiterated his refusal to negotiate with the opposing Rapid Support Forces militia until they withdraw from territory they've claimed. And so, with only one of the combatants even sending a delegation to Geneva for talks, Washington is talking about global pressure rather than imminent ceasefire.
Countries and multilaterals that have been most intensely engaged in trying to solve this crisis, to work on what we can do together for a cessation of violence and humanitarian access.
But such attempts are complicated by US partners Egypt and the UAE backing different sides in the conflict, and by a two-thirds shortfall in the $2.7 billion of aid that the UN has requested. The war sprang from long simmering tensions between the RSF and Sudan's armed forces as a return to civilian government was repeatedly delayed. The suffering has spiraled ever since: displacement, sexual violence, economic collapse, and for an ever-expanding part of the population, the stalking threat of hunger.
Well, earlier I spoke to the Sudanese political activist Amjad Farid al-Taib, and I started by asking him whether he thought the talks between the SAF, as the Sudanese armed forces are known, and the rival Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, were futile.
Thank you, Matt. I don't think that there is a real talks in Geneva taking place. As you said, SAF did not show up, and RSF sent a very low representative as their delegation. And I think that there was more preparation and more time was needed to prepare for a proper talks, especially that there is currently no conducive environment for these talks. I think without putting enough pressure on the RSF to stop attacking civilian premises, it would be very hard to engage in meaningful talks.
Why do you think the international community is so disengaged from this dreadful war in Sudan?
There are many reasons for that. There are many crises around the world. There are the situation in Gaza, the situation in Ukraine. There are many crises that's competing for the attention of the international community. But also, there is the continuous support provided from United Arab Emirates, both political and physical and military support provided to the RSF. And UAE have extensive influence over different stakeholders in the international community. And I think without actually calling a spade and calling the crimes and the atrocities committed by the RSF militia and calling on UAE and putting pressure on it to stop its support to the RSF, it would be very difficult to stop this war in a way that's acceptable for the Sudanese people.
So it's a proxy war?
Right now, yes. I think this is the UAE war on Sudan and on the Sudanese people. And this does not clear the page of SAF from how they led us to this situation. We should never forget that both RSF and SAF were partners in a coup against the transitional civilian government in 2021. And then they start competing with each other for power, and this led to the war.
Caught in this game of geopolitical chess, the people of Sudan, the destruction. The last time I checked, 10 million people displaced. Give us some picture of how awful it is on the ground at the moment.
It's 12 million now, by the way. We have 10.5 million internally displaced and around 2 million who are taking refuge in neighboring countries. 25 million Sudanese people, which is almost half the Sudanese population are in dire need of humanitarian support, and almost half of the Sudanese people are facing the risk of famine.
So finally and briefly, which is the one country or the one institution that could actually make a difference to try and stop this appalling fighting?
There are too many stakeholders, too many international, too many cooks in that kitchen. The easiest way and the quickest way to stop the war on Sudan is to hold UAE accountable for the crimes that the RSF committed by proxy and on its behalf against the Sudanese people. Also, the UN need to step up and remember that it's responsible for implementing the international law.
Right.
This war is happening between two bad actors. SAF as a corrupt state apparatus, but on the other hand, we have RSF as a fascist militia. And the fight against fascism is a fight for everyone, everywhere.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Amjad Farid Al-Tayyib, thank you very much indeed.
You're very much welcome, and thank you again for continuing your interest in addressing the situation in Sudan.